My name is Amanda, and at 27 years old, I have finally built the life I always dreamed of. But 8 years ago during Christmas, my sister Elise shoved me down the stairs. I lay at the bottom with a broken wrist while my family laughed. My mom just said, "You were always so dramatic." I did not argue or fight back that day. Instead, I did something else entirely. When they opened my letter months later, they went completely speechless. If you are watching this video, I would love to know if you have ever felt betrayed by your own family. Please like and subscribe if you want to learn how I reclaimed my power and built a life worth living. Growing up in a quiet suburb just outside of Boston, my childhood seemed normal on the surface. I was the middle child in our family of 5. My older brother Jason was 2 years my senior, while my younger sister Elise was 3 years younger than me. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family, with our matching outfits and Christmas photos and summer vacations to Cape Cod. My mother Nancy was an elementary school teacher beloved by her students and respected in the community. She had this obsession with maintaining the image of a perfect family. Every detail of our lives was carefully curated to project success and happiness. Our clothes were always pressed, our grades were displayed proudly on the refrigerator, and our family photos could have been straight out of a magazine. My father, Paul, worked as a bank manager, which meant he was rarely home. When he was, his presence filled the house with tension. He had high expectations for all of us, but especially for me and Jason. Elise somehow always managed to charm her way out of his scrutiny. Dad was strict but fair. At least that was what I believed when I was younger. In those early years, my relationship with Jason and Elise seemed typical for siblings. We played together in the backyard, built snow forts in winter, and occasionally fought over the television remote. Jason was protective of me in public, especially when other kids would tease me about my red hair or freckles. Elise would follow me around wanting to do everything I did, wear what I wore, and play with my toys. Back then, I found it annoying but also kind of sweet. I have some beautiful childhood memories that I still cherish. My 10th birthday was particularly special. Mom organized a surprise party with all my friends from school. We had a treasure hunt in the backyard, and Dad took the day off work to be there. He even brought me a set of watercolor paints after noticing my interest in art. That day, I felt truly loved and seen. Another precious memory was our family camping trip to the White Mountains when I was 11. For 3 days, we hiked trails, roasted marshmallows, and slept under the stars. Dad taught us how to identify different bird calls, and Mom told ghost stories that made us huddle together in our tent. Elise was still young enough to be afraid and slept between me and Jason for protection. Those moments of connection made me feel like we were a real family, united and loving. I also remember my first day of middle school vividly. I was terrified of getting lost in the big building or not making any friends. That morning, Jason walked me to the entrance and showed me around before heading to his own classes in the high school section. Mom had packed my favorite lunch and left an encouraging note inside. Even Elise had made me a good luck card with a drawing of the two of us holding hands. These small gestures of love made me believe I was part of a family that would always have my back. As a child, I was naturally sensitive and thoughtful. I spent hours reading books and writing in my journal, creating stories and documenting my thoughts. I was more introverted than my siblings, preferring quiet activities to the sports and social events they enjoyed. My teachers often commented on my creativity and intelligence, saying I had a unique perspective for someone my age. Art became my passion early on. I would spend hours sketching the world around me, losing myself in the colors and shapes that brought me comfort. I dreamed of becoming an artist someday, of having my work displayed in galleries and museums. When I shared this dream with my parents, Dad smiled politely but reminded me that art was a hobby, not a career. Mom was more encouraging, at least initially, buying me art supplies for birthdays and holidays. Looking back now, I can see the early signs of favoritism in our family, though I was too young to recognize them then. When Elise started elementary school, she struggled with reading. Mom spent hours working with her after school, praising even the smallest improvements. Meanwhile, my straight A's were expected, not celebrated. When Jason made the varsity basketball team as a freshman, Dad took him out for a special dinner and bought him expensive new shoes. My art contest win that same year was acknowledged with a quick good job at the dinner table. I remember one Christmas when I was 12. We gathered around the tree to open presents, everyone still in pajamas and excited. Jason received a new gaming console he had been begging for, his face lighting up as he tore off the wrapping paper. Elise squealed with delight at her new American Girl doll, complete with a wardrobe of outfits. When it was my turn, I unwrapped a generic art set from the local craft store. It was nice, but nothing special. The difference in enthusiasm and expense was subtle but unmistakable. Still, I smiled and thanked my parents, not wanting to seem ungrateful. That Christmas, as we sat around the dining table enjoying Mom's traditional turkey dinner, I looked at my family and felt a strange disconnect. Dad was praising Jason for his recent basketball game, Mom was fussing over Elise's new dress, and I sat quietly invisible in plain sight. It was the first time I remember feeling like an outsider in my own family, though many more instances would follow in the years to come. By the time I entered high school, the subtle favoritism I had experienced as a child had evolved into something more obvious and painful. My academic achievements continued to impress my teachers, but at home they were barely acknowledged. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout freshman and sophomore years, taking advanced placement classes, and even winning a statewide essay competition. Yet my parents seemed more interested in Jason's basketball games, even the ones his team lost, than my scholastic accomplishments. Elise, now in middle school, had developed a troubling pattern of behavior toward me. What started as typical little sister annoyances had grown into deliberate acts of sabotage. She would borrow my clothes without asking and return them stained or torn. She would go through my journal and share embarrassing entries with her friends. Once she even spilled water on my laptop where I had stored important project files. When I confronted her about these incidents, she would put on an innocent face and claim it was an accident or that I was overreacting. The worst part was that Mom always took her side. "Your sister is just being playful," she would say, or, "You need to learn to share, Amanda." No matter how deliberately harmful Elise's actions were, Mom found a way to dismiss my feelings and defend her youngest child. One incident stands out clearly in my memory. I had spent weeks working on a watercolor painting for the school art show. It was a portrait of our family based on an old photograph, and I had poured my heart into capturing the essence of each person. The night before the submission deadline, I left it to dry on my desk and went to take a shower. When I returned, I found Elise standing over my painting, a glass of juice spilled across the canvas, destroying hours of work. When I cried out in shock, Elise immediately started sobbing, claiming she had just come to look at it and accidentally knocked over her drink. Mom rushed in, and instead of addressing the ruined artwork, she comforted Elise and scolded me for making her cry. "It is just a painting, Amanda. You can make another one. Look how upset your sister is now." Dad, as usual, was absent during this confrontation, working late at the bank. When he heard about it later, he simply shrugged and said, "These things happen." No one seemed to understand or care about the time, effort, and emotional investment I had put into that piece. The first time Elise publicly humiliated me was during a family dinner with our grandparents. Mom had displayed her prized crystal vase on the dining table, filled with fresh flowers for the occasion. During dinner, Elise accidentally bumped the table, causing the vase to topple over and shatter on the floor. Before anyone could react, she pointed at me and exclaimed, "Amanda kicked me under the table, that is why I jumped." All eyes turned to me accusingly, and despite my protests, everyone believed Elise. I was forced to apologize and clean up the mess. Around this time, I started keeping a detailed journal as a way to cope with my emotions. Every night, I would document the day's events, the slights and microaggressions, the unfair treatment. Writing became my therapy, a way to validate my own experiences when no one else would. I hid this journal, carefully aware that if Elise or my parents found it, they would dismiss it as dramatic exaggeration. My high school graduation should have been a moment of pride and celebration. I graduated with honors, was named editor of the yearbook, and received a partial scholarship to a state university. At the ceremony, my parents smiled for photos and said all the right things, but their true excitement was reserved for Jason's acceptance to a prestigious business school. During our graduation dinner, they spent most of the time discussing his future plans, while my achievements were treated as expected rather than exceptional. As my relationship with Elise deteriorated, our conflicts escalated from verbal jabs to more concerning physical confrontations. She would accidentally bump into me in hallways, step on my feet under the table, or close doors in my face. When I would react or complain, she would cry and claim I was bullying her for no reason. One night, I overheard my parents talking about me in the kitchen. They did not know I was just around the corner grabbing a glass of water before bed. Amanda has always been such a drama queen. Mom sighed. She takes everything so personally. Dad grunted in agreement. Jason never gives us this much trouble. And Elise is still young, she will grow out of her mischief. Amanda needs to toughen up if she is going to survive in the real world. Their words cut deeper than any physical pain could have. To hear my own parents dismiss my experiences and label me as the problem was devastating. In that moment, I realized that no matter what happened, no matter how badly I was treated, they would never take my side or validate my feelings. Despite receiving offers from universities across the country, I ultimately decided to attend a school close to home. The financial reality of my partial scholarship meant that I would still need my parents' support, and they made it clear they would only help if I lived at home to save on housing costs. It was a decision I would come to regret deeply, as it kept me tethered to the toxic dynamics of my family for longer than was healthy. But at 18, with limited resources and still hoping for my parents' approval, I felt I had no other choice. My first year of college brought a taste of freedom I had never experienced before. Even though I still lived at home, spending most of my day on campus introduced me to a world beyond my family's influence. I had chosen to major in fine arts, much to my father's disapproval. He had pushed for business or education, something practical that would lead to a stable job. But for once, I stood my ground. Art was my passion, my refuge, and I was determined to pursue it professionally. The university campus became my sanctuary. Between classes, I would sit in the courtyard, sketch passers-by, and feel a sense of belonging I had never known at home. The art department was housed in an old, renovated factory building with huge windows that let in natural light. The first time I walked into the painting studio with its smell of oils and turpentine, I felt like I had finally found my place in the world. It was in a color theory class that I met Sarah, who would become my first true friend. She noticed me sitting alone during lunch one day and invited me to join her group. Initially, I was hesitant, conditioned by years of rejection to expect the worst, but Sarah was persistent and genuinely kind. She laughed at my dry humor, appreciated my artistic perspective, and most importantly, she listened when I talked. One evening, after a particularly exhausting critique session, Sarah and I went for coffee. Something about the warm cafe and her non-judgmental presence made me open up about my family situation for the first time. I told her about Elise's behavior, my parents' dismissal of my feelings, and the constant sense of being an outsider in my own home. Instead of minimizing my experiences or suggesting I was overreacting, Sarah looked me in the eye and said, "That sounds really hard, and it is not okay how they treat you." Those simple words of validation brought me to tears right there in the coffee shop. Someone finally believed me, finally saw what I had been enduring for years. Sarah suggested I speak with a counselor at the university's mental health center, offering to go with me for the first appointment. With her encouragement, I made an appointment with Dr. Bennett, a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Bennett was a calm, thoughtful woman in her 50s, who listened carefully as I recounted my experiences. Over several sessions, she helped me identify the toxic patterns in my family: the scapegoating, the golden child syndrome, the gaslighting. She introduced me to concepts like emotional abuse and family systems theory that gave me the vocabulary to understand what I had been experiencing. What you are describing, Dr. Bennett explained during our third session, is a classic dysfunctional family dynamic where one child becomes the family scapegoat. It is not about you or anything you have done wrong. It is about the roles that have been assigned within your family system. Learning about these dynamics was both painful and liberating. I grieved for the loving family I had never had, but I also felt empowered knowing that I was not crazy or overly sensitive. My perceptions were valid and my feelings were justified. As I gained this new understanding, my interactions with my family began to change. I started setting boundaries, speaking up when Elise would insult me and calling out the unfair treatment. Predictably, this was met with resistance. My mother accused me of being difficult and creating problems where none existed. My father dismissed my attempts at honest communication as college nonsense that was making me rebellious. Elise, perhaps sensing that she was losing control over me, escalated her attacks. No longer able to hurt me with casual cruelty that went unnoticed, she became more deliberate and vicious. She would wait until our parents were out of earshot to whisper things like, "No one in this family actually likes you," or "You are just jealous because Mom and Dad love me more." One particularly heated argument occurred when I discovered Elise had gone through my backpack and read my therapy notes. When I confronted her, she denied it at first, then switched tactics and mocked the contents. Poor Amanda, so sad and pathetic that she needs a therapist to deal with her imaginary problems, she sneered. When our mother walked in on this confrontation, I expected her to finally see Elise's behavior for what it was. Instead, she accused me of harassing my sister. "Why are you always picking on her?" she demanded. "She is younger than you. You should be setting a better example." That night, I had a long, tearful phone call with Sarah, who reminded me that I could not change my family's behavior, only my response to it. "You need to protect yourself," she advised. "Their approval is not worth your mental health." Inspired by my therapy sessions and Sarah's support, I began documenting the toxic behaviors more systematically. I kept a detailed journal of incidents, including dates, exact quotes, and the context. I saved text messages, emails, and even recorded some of our family interactions when tensions were high. Part of me hoped that having concrete evidence might someday help my parents see the truth, but mostly I needed these records to maintain my own sense of reality when everyone around me was trying to distort it. As my second year of college approached, I considered moving out, but financial constraints made it difficult. My partial scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses, and the part-time job I had taken at the campus art store barely covered my art supplies and transportation costs. Still dependent on my parents financially, I made the difficult decision to return home for another year, including the dreaded Christmas break. Despite everything, a small part of me still hoped for reconciliation. Maybe I thought if I could just find the right words, the right moment, my family would understand how much they had hurt me. Maybe this Christmas would be different. Maybe they would finally see me for who I really was, and love me accordingly. With this fragile hope, I prepared to spend the holiday at home, unaware that it would become the breaking point in my relationship with my family. The tension was palpable from the moment I walked through the front door that December 23rd. The house was already decorated for Christmas, with garlands draped over the banister and the artificial tree glittering in the corner of the living room. Mom was in the kitchen baking her traditional gingerbread cookies, the smell wafting through the house in a way that should have been comforting but only reminded me of happier times long past. Elise barely looked up from her phone when I entered, offering a disinterested "hey" before returning to her scrolling. At 19, she had grown more beautiful and more confident, her social media accounts filled with photos of her with friends at parties and school events. Jason, home from business school for the holidays, gave me a quick side hug before returning to help Dad with the outdoor lights. "How are your grades?" was the first real question Mom asked me, not how I was feeling or how my art was progressing. When I told her I had made the dean's list and one of my paintings had been selected for the university's student showcase, she nodded absently while arranging cookies on a plate. "That is nice, dear. Did you take any business classes like your father suggested?" That evening, we gathered to decorate the Christmas tree, a tradition that had once brought me joy but now felt like an obligation. Dad handed out ornaments from the storage boxes, making sure Elise got all her childhood favorites. As I reached for a delicate glass star I had always loved, Elise quickly grabbed it. "This one has always been mine," she declared, though we both knew it had been a gift from our grandmother to me. When I pointed this out, Mom sighed dramatically. "Amanda, please do not start an argument. It is Christmas. Just let your sister have the ornament." I bit my tongue and continued decorating in silence, placing my ornaments on the back of the tree where no one would notice or comment. Jason caught my eye at one point, a flash of understanding crossing his face, but he quickly looked away, unwilling to get involved. Christmas Eve dinner with extended family was even worse. Aunts, uncles, and cousins filled our dining room, the conversation loud and overlapping. Elise was the center of attention, regaling everyone with stories about her social life and academic accomplishments, many of which I suspected were exaggerated. My father beamed proudly as she spoke, while my mother kept encouraging her. "Tell them about your volunteer work, Elise, or show them that photo of you at the homecoming dance." When Aunt Martha politely asked about my art studies, Elise interrupted before I could answer. "Amanda just draws all day. It is not like she is doing anything important like medical research." Instead of correcting her, my parents laughed along with everyone else, as if my passion and hard work were indeed some kind of joke. I excused myself early from dinner, retreating to my room under the pretense of a headache. No one seemed to notice or care about my absence. From my window, I could see the neighbors' Christmas lights twinkling against the dark sky, and I wondered how many other families had these hidden dysfunctions beneath their festive exteriors. Christmas morning arrived cold and clear. We gathered around the tree in our pajamas, a tradition that felt like a parody of family togetherness. As always, the pile of presents for Elise dwarfed mine and even Jason's. She received expensive jewelry, designer clothes, and the latest smartphone. Jason got practical items for his apartment and some sports equipment. My gifts were an assortment of generic art supplies and a gift card to a clothing store I never shopped at, showing how little my parents actually knew about my preferences. "Thanks for the watercolors," I said, trying to sound grateful, despite the fact that I primarily worked in acrylics now, something I had mentioned numerous times. "These will be useful." "They were on sale," my mother replied dismissively. "I thought you would appreciate something practical instead of those expensive brands you are always talking about." The comment stung, especially considering the brand new phone in Elise's hands must have cost hundreds of dollars. But I maintained my composure, having learned long ago that showing hurt only gave them more ammunition. After the gifts were opened and breakfast was eaten, the house settled into that peculiar post-Christmas morning lull. Dad retreated to watch basketball, Jason went to call his girlfriend, and Mom started preparing for the evening's dinner. I decided to go upstairs to my room to call Sarah and thank her for the thoughtful gift she had mailed me, a set of professional grade brushes she knew I had been eyeing. As I reached the top of the stairs, Elise appeared in the hallway, blocking my path. Her expression was cold, challenging. "I heard you talking to Jason about moving out after this semester," she said, her voice low but hostile. "Running away because you cannot handle being part of this family." I took a deep breath, trying to maintain the boundaries Dr. Bennett and I had discussed. "My housing plans are none of your business, Elise." She stepped closer, her face inches from mine. "You think you are so special with your art and your college friends. But we all know the truth. You are the weakest link in this family. Always have been, always will be." "Please move," I said, firmly refusing to engage with her taunts. "I need to get to my room." Or what, she sneered, giving my shoulder a small push. "What are you going to do about it? Cry to your therapist again?" I tried to step around her, but she moved to block me, giving me another harder push that made me stumble back slightly. We were now dangerously close to the top of the staircase. "Stop it, Elise," I warned, genuine fear creeping into my voice. "This is not funny." "Everything is always so serious with you," she mocked, giving me one final forceful shove. Time seemed to slow down as I lost my balance. I remember the moment of weightlessness, the desperate grab for the banister that missed by inches, and then the sickening sensation of falling backward. Each stair hit my body with jarring force as I tumbled down. The world spun around me until I landed at the bottom with a thud, my right wrist taking the brunt of the impact with a crack that seemed to echo through the house. Pain shot up my arm, sharp and nauseating. I lay there dazed and in shock, looking up at Elise at the top of the stairs. Her initial expression of surprise quickly transformed into a smirk. She actually laughed, a sound that hurt more than my physical pain. The commotion brought my parents and Jason running from different parts of the house. Mom took one look at me sprawled at the bottom of the stairs and sighed deeply. "What happened now, Amanda?" she asked, her voice tinged with annoyance rather than concern. Through tears of pain, I managed to say, "Elise pushed me down the stairs." Elise immediately adopted an innocent expression. "I did not. She tripped and is trying to blame me again. I was just standing in the hallway." Mom turned to me with that familiar look of disappointment. "You are always so dramatic. You probably just missed a step." Dad barely glanced at me, already turning back toward the living room. "Be more careful next time. You know how clumsy you can be." It was Jason who finally approached me, concern evident in his eyes as he noticed how I was cradling my wrist. "I think she is actually hurt," he said, kneeling beside me. "Her wrist looks swollen." Mom reluctantly came closer to examine my injury, her mouth tightening when she saw the unnatural angle of my wrist. "Fine, we will take her to urgent care." "But really, Amanda, did you have to do this on Christmas Day?" As they helped me to the car, I caught sight of Elise watching from the top of the stairs, her face showing not a hint of remorse. In that moment, something inside me broke along with my wrist. The last thread of hope that my family might someday change, that they might someday truly love me, snapped completely. In the cold, sterile examining room of the urgent care center, as the doctor confirmed my wrist was indeed fractured and would need a cast, I made a silent vow to myself. This would be the last time my family would ever hurt me. I would endure this final injury, this last humiliation, but then I would find a way to break free no matter what it took. The recovery process after my injury was a lonely experience. My parents drove me to follow-up appointments with the orthopedist, but made it clear they considered it an inconvenience. Mom complained about having to rearrange her schedule, while Dad remained mostly silent, his disapproval evident in his tight-lipped expressions. Elise never acknowledged what she had done, and whenever I entered a room, she would leave or pretend to be engrossed in her phone. The 6 weeks I spent in that cast were some of the most clarifying of my life. Each twinge of pain, each struggle to complete simple tasks with one hand, reinforced my determination to escape. Dr. Bennett called it a moment of reckoning during one of our sessions after I returned to campus. "Sometimes," she said gently, "it takes a physical injury to make us acknowledge the emotional wounds we have been ignoring." When the spring semester began, I returned to university with a new sense of purpose. The cast was still on my wrist, a visible reminder of what I was fighting against. My professors were understanding, granting extensions on projects that required 2 hands. Sarah had become even more supportive, helping me carry my art supplies and taking notes when my wrist ached too much to write. I threw myself into my studies with renewed focus, knowing that academic success was my ticket to independence. My goal was clear: I needed to be completely self-sufficient by graduation, which meant securing scholarships, building a portfolio strong enough to land a job, and saving every penny I could in the meantime. I picked up additional shifts at the campus art store and started doing freelance graphic design work for local businesses. The pay was modest, but every dollar went into a secret savings account I had opened at a different bank than the one where my father worked. Small commissions for portraits and custom artwork provided extra income, which I carefully budgeted and saved. In my junior year, I met Professor Martin, a visiting artist who took an interest in my work. After class one day, he asked about the themes of isolation and fractured identity that appeared in my paintings. Something about his genuine interest and kind demeanor made me open up about my family situation. Instead of pity, he offered practical support. "You have real talent, Amanda," he told me, "but more importantly, you have perspective. Your experiences, painful as they are, give your work depth and authenticity." Professor Martin became a mentor, helping me apply for additional scholarships and introducing me to gallery owners and potential employers. He also connected me with a support group for survivors of family abuse where I met others with similar experiences. Hearing their stories made me realize I was not alone and gave me the courage to continue on my path to independence. By the beginning of my senior year, my plan was taking shape. I had secured a prestigious internship at a design studio in New York City that would begin after graduation. My portfolio was growing stronger, featuring work that transformed my pain into powerful visual narratives. And most importantly, I had saved enough money to cover the first few months of living expenses in a new city. The final piece of my plan was the most difficult: severing ties with my family. Dr. Bennett and I spent many sessions discussing this decision. Cutting contact with family is never easy, she cautioned, even when they have caused significant harm. Are you prepared for the emotional aftermath? I considered her question carefully. I think the pain of staying connected would be greater than the pain of letting go, I finally answered. Every interaction leaves me feeling diminished and doubting my own reality. I cannot heal while still exposed to the source of injury. As graduation approached, I achieved a significant milestone in my artistic journey. My senior thesis exhibition, a series of mixed media pieces exploring themes of gaslighting and emotional resilience, received accolades from faculty and visiting critics alike. The centerpiece was a large canvas depicting a staircase with shadowy figures at the top and a single broken object at the bottom, subtle enough that only those who knew my story would understand its significance. No one from my family attended the opening. I had invited them out of a sense of formality rather than hope, and their absence, while painful, confirmed I was making the right decision. Sarah and my other friends filled the gallery space with genuine support and celebration, showing me what real love looked like. In the quiet of my dorm room that night, I began drafting the letter that would be my final communication with my family. It took several attempts to find the right tone, one that was neither accusatory nor apologetic but simply truthful. Over several pages, I detailed specific incidents of mistreatment, the patterns of favoritism and scapegoating, and the cumulative effect these experiences had on my development and self-worth. I included copies of journal entries I had written over the years, screenshots of dismissive text messages, and even a few photographs documenting physical injuries, including my broken wrist. The evidence was not meant to convince them to change, I realized, but to establish my truth in a way that could not be dismissed or rewritten. The final paragraph was the most difficult to write. I am not writing this letter to hurt you or to seek revenge. I am writing because I need you to understand why I will no longer be part of this family dynamic. I have spent years trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I have absorbed blame and shame that were not mine to carry. I have forgiven countless injuries, both emotional and physical, but I cannot and will not continue this pattern. As of today, I am choosing myself and my well-being. Please do not attempt to contact me. If someday you are willing to acknowledge the harm done and take steps toward genuine change, I may be open to a different kind of relationship. Until then, I wish you well, but I must move forward without you. Before sealing the envelope, I added one final item, a small watercolor painting of a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, a symbol of the transformation I was undergoing. It was both a goodbye and a declaration of independence. The day after graduation, while my family was still in town, expecting me to join them for a celebratory lunch, I mailed the letter to our home address. Then I loaded my few belongings into Sarah's car, and we headed toward New York City, toward my future. As we crossed the state line, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I took a deep breath that did not hurt. New York City greeted me with its characteristic blend of intimidation and possibility. Sarah helped me move into my tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn, a fifth-floor walk-up with questionable plumbing but huge windows that filled the space with morning light. It was small and far from perfect, but it was mine, paid for with my own money, and free from the suffocating atmosphere of my family home. The first few months were challenging in ways I had not fully anticipated. My internship at the design studio was demanding, requiring long hours for minimal pay. I supplemented my income by waiting tables at a cafe near my apartment, often working 7 days a week just to cover rent and basic necessities. There were nights when I sat on my mattress on the floor, eating ramen noodles and questioning my decision to cut ties with the financial safety net my family had provided. But even on the hardest days, the freedom to exist without constant criticism and gaslighting was worth every struggle. I could leave a mug unwashed in the sink without anyone making it evidence of my character flaws. I could play music that I enjoyed without being mocked for my taste. I could create art that expressed my true feelings without fear of it being destroyed or dismissed. Gradually, I built a life that reflected who I really was. I decorated my small apartment with thrift store finds and my own artwork. I established a routine that included early morning sketching sessions before work and weekend visits to museums and galleries. I joined a community art collective where I met other young artists who became friends and collaborators. About 3 months after my move, my phone lit up with my mother's number for the first time. I watched it ring, my heart pounding before letting it go to voicemail. Her message was exactly what Dr. Bennett had prepared me for: angry accusations followed by guilt-inducing statements about how I was breaking the family apart. "How could you write such horrible lies about us?" she demanded. "After everything we have done for you, your father is furious and Elise is devastated. Is this how you repay us for raising you and paying for your education?" There was no acknowledgement of my experiences, no reflection on the evidence I had provided, just defense and denial. I deleted the message without responding. Over the next few weeks, the attempts at contact continued. Text messages from Elise fluctuated between self-pitying, "I cannot believe you would hurt me like this," and attacking, "You always were selfish and attention-seeking." Dad sent a single email, clinical and dismissive, stating that I was indulging in revisionist history, and that when I was ready to apologize and act like an adult, they would be willing to speak with me. Jason's message was different. A brief text that simply read, "I should have done more to protect you. I am sorry." It was the only communication that acknowledged any wrongdoing, the only one that made me pause and consider responding. But I held firm to my boundaries, knowing that engaging with any family member would likely draw me back into their dysfunctional system. Months passed and the contact attempts became less frequent. My mother made one last effort at reconciliation, but it came with conditions. "If you can agree to put the past behind us and stop making these accusations, we can move forward as a family." There was no recognition of harm, no promise of change, just an expectation that I would once again sacrifice my truth for the sake of family harmony. Meanwhile, my new life continued to develop. My internship evolved into a junior designer position with better pay and benefits. My artwork began to gain recognition in small gallery shows around the city. And most significantly, I met Michael. He was a photographer who came to the design studio to collaborate on a project. Tall, with kind eyes and a quiet confidence, he asked thoughtful questions about my design concepts and actually listened to my answers. After the project wrapped, he invited me for coffee, which turned into dinner, which led to more dates and deeper conversations. With Michael, I experienced what a healthy relationship felt like for the first time. He respected my boundaries, valued my opinions, and never made me question my own perceptions. When I eventually shared my family history with him, he listened without judgment and responded with empathy rather than doubt. "I believe you," he said simply, words that still had the power to bring tears to my eyes. "And I am so sorry you went through that alone." Building trust did not come easily after years of having it betrayed. There were moments when I would flinch at a raised hand even if Michael was just reaching for something on a high shelf. Times when a minor disagreement would trigger disproportionate anxiety, convinced he would abandon me for being difficult. But he was patient, never taking my protective reactions personally and giving me the space to work through my triggers. As my personal life flourished, so did my professional one. A year after moving to New York, I was commissioned to create a series of illustrations for a national magazine article about emotional abuse and recovery. The exposure led to more work and connections in the art world. I started teaching evening workshops at a community center, sharing techniques that helped me express and process trauma through visual art. Around this time, I received an unexpected email from Jason. He had left our family home as well, moving across the country to Seattle, where he had taken a job with a tech company rather than joining our father's bank as expected. "Things have fallen apart since you left," he wrote. "Mom and Dad are separating. Elise is struggling without being the center of attention. Your letter forced a reckoning that was long overdue." He went on to explain that he had started therapy himself, working through his role as the golden child and the way it had prevented him from seeing or stopping the abuse I experienced. "I am not asking for forgiveness," he concluded. "I just wanted you to know that your courage changed things. You told your truth, and it mattered." Reading his words, I felt a complex mix of vindication, sadness, and cautious hope. Not hope for a reconciliation with my parents or Elise, but perhaps for a new kind of relationship with my brother, one built on honesty and mutual respect, rather than the roles we had been assigned in our dysfunctional family system. My 25th birthday marked a significant milestone. I celebrated with a small gathering of friends in my new apartment, a larger, brighter space I had moved into with Michael. Surrounded by people who genuinely cared for me, enjoying a cake that Sarah had baked and presents chosen with actual knowledge of my preferences, I realized something profound. I was happy. Not the performative happiness I had pretended to feel during family celebrations, but a genuine, deep-seated contentment with my life and myself. Later that night, as Michael and I walked along the Brooklyn promenade, looking at the Manhattan skyline glittering across the water, he asked what I was thinking. "I was just reflecting on how far I have come," I answered truthfully. 3 years ago, I was lying at the bottom of a staircase with a broken wrist while my family laughed. Now I am here with work. I love people who value me and a life I built on my own terms. He squeezed my hand gently. "You should be proud. Not everyone finds the strength to break free from that kind of situation." "I wish I had done it sooner," I admitted. "You did it exactly when you were ready," he replied. "And that is what matters." As we turned to head home, my phone buzzed with a text from Jason. It was a simple birthday wish followed by news that would once again shift my understanding of my family's dynamics. Our parents' divorce was finalized and Elise had moved back home after dropping out of college, struggling to function in a world that did not revolve around her. Today at 27, my life bears little resemblance to what it was 8 years ago. I am a successful designer and illustrator in Brooklyn with my own small studio space in a converted warehouse where I create both commercial work and personal art. My relationship with Michael has deepened into an engagement with plans for a small wedding next spring. We share a sunny apartment with large windows perfect for my plants and his photography. 3 years after leaving my family behind, I agreed to meet Jason for coffee during his business trip to New York. I chose a public place, brought Michael along for support, and set clear boundaries about what I was willing to discuss. To my surprise, the meeting was healing rather than harmful. Jason had continued his therapy and had gained genuine insight into our family dynamics. "I was complicit," he acknowledged without prompting. "I saw how they treated you differently, and I did nothing because it was easier for me that way. I benefited from being the golden child, and that allowed me to ignore what was happening to you." His accountability without excuses was something I had never experienced from a family member. We talked for hours that day, reconstructing our shared childhood from 2 different perspectives and finding common ground in our adult understanding of its dysfunction. Over time, Jason and I built a new kind of sibling relationship, one based on mutual respect and honest communication. We call each other regularly now, and he visits New York a few times a year. Last Christmas, I even invited him to spend the holiday with Michael and me, creating new traditions to replace the painful ones from our past. As for the rest of my family, the story took unexpected turns. My parents' divorce was finalized 4 years ago, ending a marriage that had been more about appearances than genuine connection. My father quickly remarried a younger woman and relocated to Florida, seemingly unchanged by the family's dissolution. Elise struggled significantly without the family system that had centered her. After dropping out of college, she cycled through jobs and relationships, unable to maintain either when she was not automatically given the preferential treatment she had come to expect. According to Jason, she still occasionally asks about me, but her inquiries always have an edge of resentment rather than genuine concern. The most surprising development came just last year, 5 years after I sent my letter. A thick envelope arrived at my studio postmarked from my hometown but with no return address. Inside was a letter from my mother, handwritten on plain paper rather than the monogrammed stationery she had always used. "Dear Amanda," it began, "I have written this letter in my head 100 times over the past 5 years. Each attempt seemed inadequate, which is why you are only receiving it now. First, I want to say simply, I am sorry. I am sorry for not protecting you. I am sorry for not believing you. I am sorry for allowing and sometimes encouraging the mistreatment you endured in our home." She went on to explain that after the divorce, she had started therapy herself and had been forced to confront the role she played in the family dysfunction. "It was easier to see you as the problem than to acknowledge my own failures as a mother," she wrote. "I favored Elise because she was easier to parent, and I allowed her behavior to go unchecked because confronting it would have meant confronting myself." The letter continued for several pages, specific in its acknowledgments and without requests for forgiveness or reunion. It ended simply, "You owed me nothing, but you gave me the truth. It took me too long to accept it, and I have no expectations about your response. I just wanted you to know that your voice was finally heard." I sat with that letter for weeks, processing my feelings with my own therapist and discussing it with Michael and Sarah. The acknowledgement I had longed for had finally arrived, but I was no longer the same person who had desperately needed it. I had built a life and identity independent of my family's validation. Eventually, I decided to respond with a brief note thanking her for the apology and explaining that while I appreciated her insights, I needed more time before considering any kind of relationship. It was the first communication I had initiated with any family member besides Jason since sending my letter years before. 6 months ago, I agreed to meet my mother at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between New York and my hometown. The woman who greeted me seemed smaller, somehow less intimidating than the mother of my memories. Her hair had grayed, and the rigid perfectionism that had defined her appearance had softened. Our conversation was awkward at first, stilted with the weight of years of silence and hurt. But gradually, as we worked through the initial discomfort, something honest emerged. She did not make excuses for her behavior or try to minimize my experiences. Instead, she listened. Really listened, perhaps for the first time. "I miss knowing you," she said toward the end of our meeting. "I was so busy trying to shape you into what I thought you should be that I never appreciated who you actually were." We have met twice more since then, each time building a tentative bridge across the chasm of our past. I do not know if we will ever have what might be considered a normal mother-daughter relationship, but we are creating something new, something based on authentic communication, rather than roles and expectations. As for Elise, I have maintained my distance. Jason tells me she has shown no real remorse or understanding of her actions, continuing to position herself as the victim in every narrative. Perhaps someday she will gain the insight needed for reconciliation, but I no longer wait for it or define myself by its absence. The most important lesson I have learned through this journey is about the nature of boundaries. Setting them is not an act of cruelty or rejection, but an act of self-preservation and ultimately self-love. Sometimes walking away from those who cannot or will not respect your humanity is the most compassionate choice you can make, both for yourself and paradoxically for them. My story has become part of a book I am writing, combining personal narrative with the artwork that helped me process and express my experiences. My hope is that it will reach others who are still trapped in dysfunctional family systems, showing them that escape is possible and that a rich, fulfilling life awaits on the other side of that difficult decision. The broken wrist healed years ago, leaving only the faintest evidence of injury. The emotional wounds have taken longer to mend, but they too have formed their own kind of strength in the healing. Like the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with gold, illuminating rather than hiding the damage, I have come to see my scars as part of the beauty of my resilience. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away from someone who consistently hurt you, even if they were family? I would love to hear your stories of setting boundaries and finding your own path to healing. Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider subscribing to my channel for more conversations about family dynamics, healing from trauma, and building a life on your own terms. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family we create for ourselves is more nurturing than the one we were born into. Stay strong, take care of yourselves, and know that you deserve love that does not hurt.